Hello, this is George Espinoza with my explanation of my SIOP lesson plan and unit design. First of all, I am looking at the content grade area topic is 5th grade mathematics, and the content area is operations and algebraic thinking. My state standards or my Common Core state standards come from 5.0a.1, which describes the use of parentheses, brackets, and braces in a numerical expression and evaluates expressions with these symbols. I picked this standard mainly because it was the first one, and it's an area that I am pretty familiar with, as I am pretty familiar with the order of operations as well as how to use them in mathematical expressions. The English language proficiency standard that I chose was 4-5.2, Standard 2, which describes how students will be able to participate in grade appropriate oral and written exchanges of information, ideas, and analysis responding to peer and audience or reader comments and questions. In other words, I take that to mean that they will be able to have a discussion, be it with any listener, teacher, or peer regarding the oral exchange or the conversation regarding the information portrayed in the Common Core State Standard, which deals with mathematical expressions and order of operations, specifically parentheses, brackets, and braces. So let's get into the lesson. The essential question that I chose was pretty difficult to come up with simply because math is very dry. It's very, there's not a lot of real life interest that I think applies to students at the 4th and 5th grade level. And so I tried to think about it from my perspective, mainly being, I didn't really ever consider what math would be used for as I got out to the real world. So I came up with the question, what are the real life consequences of using these operations incorrectly? Which in my life I would have found out the hard way, or have found out the hard way, what these consequences look like in real life. And so the content objective central focus is that I want students to be able to recognize parentheses and brackets in a mathematical expression. Specifically, I want them to be able to differentiate the two and also to be able to assemble their own mathematical expressions using parentheses, brackets. And from their language objective, they will be able to describe the proper use of parentheses and brackets in mathematical expressions, and they will also be able to use vocabulary and terms in discussion with teacher and peers correctly. And I believe that speaks back to the English language standard that I selected. In student-friendly language, I broke it down as such: students will notice parentheses and brackets in a math problem, and they will also be able to make their own math problems using parentheses and brackets. Their language objectives, they will be able to talk about parentheses and brackets, how they're used in mathematical problems. They'll use vocabulary, words, and terms correctly in conversation with teachers, peers, and just about anybody else. Some of the key vocabulary that students will encounter and use throughout the lesson or the unit would be order of operations, parentheses, as well as brackets. The materials that they will need to complete this unit or this lesson specifically would be pencil and paper, calculator for some of the more complex math problems, a rubric, which will be used in lesson 2 of the unit, a tablet or computer for mainly for early finishers. I'll talk about it a little bit later, but early finishers have the option to participate in online gamification assignments that they will get to do if they finish the project early or the assignments early. But also, using a website called splashlearn.com, there is a pre-assessment that I believe happens in lesson 2 that they would do on their computer or tablet. In addition, I would use a PowerPoint presentation to show terminology such as order of operations, as well as non-linguistic representations. And then they also will need building supplies, which will be supplied by myself for day 2 project. So, higher order questions. First of all is, how does using parentheses and brackets incorrectly affect or change the outcome of a math problem? And the second question is, why is it important to use these brackets and parentheses correctly in various jobs? I wanted them to be able to think beyond just the current application. For example, if they were building a water tower, or if they were, as Mrs. Vincent's husband does, engineering a dam, or if they were building a rocket or something, why would they use brackets, parentheses, and such in a real life way? What are the consequences of that? And then why is it important to use them correctly? And I think we can come up with ways to describe that to students and keep them engaged in a very dry subject such as math, parentheses, and brackets, if they're constantly thinking about what lies possibly in the future for them regarding the use of their time in their career and how they would use math. So as described, there is a plan for early finishers, or an extension, which would be to allow students to play an assigned game on SplashLearn.com. The assigned game coincides and is connected directly to the subject area that we are talking about, which is order of operations and parentheses and brackets. For the IEP students, the modifications for them would be, number 1, to allow students a quiet space to read information with a partner or by themselves, and allow them to pre-read the information pertaining to the lesson. They would not necessarily be directly involved with the information as we were speaking about it in the live action. They would be able to pre-read it by themselves where they felt comfortable. Maybe there was a quiet corner where they could go read it, become familiar with it before they would be expected to answer questions or have a discussion about it, which is addressed here, where the lesson will address the modifications in this way. I will only call on students when they have been able to pre-read the information, or expect them to answer aloud only if or when they feel comfortable. The lesson addresses the following multiple intelligences. It looks like I actually forgot one, because we are going to be, well, in lesson 1 we're not doing a building project, but in lesson 2 there is a bodily kinesthetic and as well as an interpersonal aspect. This is the rubric that I came up with for students to be able to grade each other's project work. There will be a cooperative learning assignment on lesson 2. This will be part of setting the standards and objectives for the entire unit, where they will become familiar with this particular rubric, which will be used to grade a cooperative learning assignment. And they will grade each other's work, whether it be in pairs or 3s or 4s. They will work together and they will grade each other's work. Now on to the sequence of the lesson. The first 10 minutes will be spent of each lesson building background, linking to experiences, and learning vocabulary and language. I would, on the start of all 3 lessons, play this video. It's on PEDMAS, which is parentheses, exponents, division, multiplication, addition, and subtraction. And it just describes to the students in a very unique way, musical as well as other ways that visual learners might be able to understand or connect with a little bit better, on how to deal with order of operations and what sequence they you would use for an order of operations. Coming into this lesson, order of operations should be something that they're already familiar with, but I wanted to play the video and to kind of link this to something that they should already know, as well as to figure out what I need to cover again as far as order of operations goes prior to moving on to something that's a little bit more complex like parentheses. So I'd write the acronym PEDMOS on the board. We would discuss review the order of operations, discuss the reasons for the order of operations are important, discuss different jobs that use order of operations, specifically parentheses and brackets, introduce parentheses and brackets, and then show students the rubric to assess the work that we would be doing in lesson 2. The language and syntax in this lesson is discussing order of operations, introduce PEDMOS, the acronym PEDMOS, review key vocabulary that would be used, such as order of operations, parentheses, and brackets. In this particular lesson, they would use this information in class discussion and an in-class assignment. As shown, student activities will be scaffolded, grouped, and processes and strategies. And what I identified is that this lesson pretty much covers all of them. There will be modeling by the teacher, there will be guidance by the teacher, and there will be an opportunity for independent work. In grouping, the whole class will do work. They will work in small groups. They'll work with a partner, and they will work independently. The processes, they can do group reading. There will be a group cooperative learning assignment. They will listen as a group, and there will be an opportunity for independent work as well. And so that's that part. Here's the sequence of the lesson. Lesson 1, and I broke it down in slides. The first slide we would spend 12 minutes on. The first 5 minutes would be why do we use brackets and why are they important in real life. That would be a group discussion. 2.5 minutes we would be watching the PEDMOS video, write PEDMOS on the board. 4.5 minutes we would discuss order of operations for a total of 12 minutes. The overall lesson would take about an hour is what I'm assuming. Second slide would be an 8-minute total. 3 minutes we would discuss the learning objectives. Another 3 minutes we would discuss the language objectives. 2 minutes we would discuss the essential questions. In slide 3 we would take the pre-assessment, which can be found on splashlearn.com, as you can see here. They click on this and each student has a pre-assessment where the results to the pre-assessment are live, real time. They would take that and that would be on their tablet or computer. Slide 4 is a 10-minute slide where we would introduce key vocabulary. There would be some non-linguistic representations shown on this slide. Examples of parentheses and brackets in mathematical expressions would also be shown here. Now the 16-minute block on slide 5, we would introduce an in-class assignment. 10 minutes would be time for them to work on the assignment in class. Whatever they didn't finish would go home as homework. In the event that all students did finish the assignment, we would do a 3-minute review for the in-class assignment. If all students did not finish, that 3 minutes would be used to discuss strategies in philosophy and using parentheses and brackets, as well as take any questions that might arise during that time. The last 4 minutes would be the introduction of the rubric for Day 2 group project, which totals an hour for the entire lesson. The last 10 minutes would be reviewing key vocabulary, PEDMOS, order of operations, parentheses and brackets, as well as the key content concepts, which would also include PEDMOS and order of operations. We would then discuss whether or not a lesson objective was met prior to moving on to the next task. So here we have my Lesson 1 SIOP lesson plan. It has been a pleasure sharing it with all of you. and I look forward to your feedback. Thank you.